All righty. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I have to say, I'm very impressed by the number of people who've registered for this program. We've obviously touched a nerve here, and I'm very glad that we can be of service by talking about this really, really important topic. My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. We've been around since 2011. If you're new to us, we do programs like this throughout the year, and we slow down quite a lot over the summer, but I'm really grateful that we were able to get this one in and bring this to everyone's attention. So just a reminder to please mute yourselves if you're not one of our presenters at this time. We will have an opportunity for you all to share later, but please do mute yourselves for now. Thank you. A great big thank you to our community partner for tonight's program, the Bucks County Drug and Alcohol Commission. We are so grateful to Bucks County for partnering with us. And obviously, you do not need to be from Bucks County to be participating. We have two presenters from Delco, and I live in Delco. So it takes a village to talk about this stuff, right? There's so many great people out here that we're working with. So thank you all for being here. And we have somebody who lives in New Jersey who's also a presenter tonight. So I want to tell you about just a couple of services that we offer through Be a Part of the Conversation. One is that we have parent partnership meetings. These are kind of similar to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon groups, and you're also going to hear from Mary Cosgrove, who facilitates another group. We really encourage all of the above. We developed these programs way back in 2011 when we started as an alternative or an add-on, a supplement to those other kinds of groups. These are parents, guardians, and grandparents who have been impacted by a loved one's substance use. We have 21 meetings taking place every week. There are 5 days a week. We have a meeting either on Zoom or in person. You can go to this page of our website and click on any of these buttons. The purple buttons are in person, and they will take you to the address, the location. The green buttons are Zoom meetings, and those will either have a link to join or information on how to get the link. Okay. And by the way, all totally free to attend, all led by folks like me who have some experience with this. We're family members who've been around this for quite a while. So you're in very good hands in these groups. We also have something called the Family Recovery Course. This is a 3-part course that really addresses how this has impacted us. Again, looking at the parent, guardian, or grandparent who has a child at any age, whether it's 15 or 50. And trust me, we've had everyone in between. So we just really love to have this opportunity capped at 12 people. So it's really quite personal. There's a lot of great curriculum that we're sharing and an opportunity to stay connected by going to parent partnership meetings, by attending programs like these. And you can find out information about that on our website. Again, Judy's going to share those links with you. So excited about our presenters. I don't have a photo of Colleen. We like to help our family members stay somewhat private, but Mary Cosgrove is with us. She is the Family Support Services Coordinator at Mirmont Treatment Center. She provides, she shares her experience as a family member of someone who struggled with substance use. I'm sorry. Mary offers support services to family members of those who struggle with substance use disorders. And Lauren Williams, who is with with Phoenix Trauma Center. She's an experiential trauma therapist. She provides therapy for individuals and training workshops for mental health professionals. Also with us is Colleen, who will share her experience as the family member of someone who has struggled with substance use. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. And we're going to start with Mary Cosgrove. So Mary, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here, all three of you. So grateful.
Thanks so much, Kim and Judy, for having me, and just to everyone that's been be a part of the conversation. Like Kim said, my name's Mary Cosgrove. I am a clinician at Mirmont Treatment Center, and I oversee our family program. I am someone that works at the inpatient and outpatient levels of care, so I get to work on a group and individual basis with family members of people that struggle with substance use. I have just recently gotten licensed, so we'll be probably starting to branch out a bit more and expand the family program so that we can really be offering more clinical services. to people who are impacted by the disease of addiction, both from the lens of being the addict and the alcoholic, and the person that loves someone that struggles with this disease. A few things like Kim started to mention, I do facilitate a group every Wednesday evening that meets virtually. And that is for anyone that loves someone that struggles with substance use. So it's something that we strongly encourage to any and all of our family members of people that come through the doors of Mirmont, but it's also something that's open to the community of anyone that loves someone. My typical cap in terms of age is I ask for people to be above the age of 16 to come onto that group. However, I am currently working on building a clinical service to offer to teens of people, whether they're the child of someone that struggles with substance use or the sibling. So we're looking at really branching that out from a trauma lens because of the newest clinical service that I've started to offer for families, which is a little bit differently offered than my support group, since the support group is something that's similar to like a 12-step meeting. However, we don't base it in 12 steps, and there is crosstalk. I typically add some type of psychoeducation, and then we do a lot of sharing and things like that, just despite where you might be at your level of healing as a family member. But my clinical services that I've started to offer are the Family Resilience Retreat, which is a 2-day commitment. It's a weekend retreat that I've started through my training with Dr. Scott Giacomucci, who actually owns the Phoenix Center that Lauren works at. I've gotten to do a number of trainings with Lauren so far. I am going through for full certification in psychodrama, which is an experiential trauma approach therapeutic model, and it's something that I really feel strongly about bringing to families. So it's something that we utilize for the patients at Mirmont Treatment Center, but really getting closer to the work with the families, I was able to identify that we do so much work to identify the trauma and, what came first, the chicken or the egg, for the person with the identified substance use disorder, but not always really honing in on the trauma that was either experienced or has been experienced through the disease and the active addiction for the family. So through all of that work, this Family Resilience Retreat that I started last year is something that we offer at our outpatient location. So it's my next one that I'm hosting is August 17th and 18th. It is something that I cap at 12 people, just due to the nature of the experiential work that we're doing. But I would love to speak to anyone individually more about that if you're potentially interested. There is a cost to that, but we have been fortunate enough to have donations made by some of our family members that I've been working with for the last few years. So we do have scholarships that we're offering as well. But that kind of leads and segues into what I'm here to discuss tonight, which is really the impact of addiction on the family system through the lens of how it affects our families and ourselves from a trauma-informed lens. Really looking at the trauma and the impact of the trauma on not just the person that struggles with substance use, but on the people that love that person, right? So often when we're treating the disease of addiction, we look at the identified patient, right? That's the priority. That's the job when we have a patient that walks in through the doors of somewhere like Mirmont. The care team is so focused on that identified patient. Did you have something?
Don't think we're hearing. Yeah, Mary, we weren't hearing you for a minute there. So, or at least I wasn't. Okay, I think you're okay now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. Yes.
So what I was saying was that the common approach that, somewhere like Mirmont or anyone else that really treats people with substance use disorders or dual diagnosis disorders is of course, the care team at the facility is focused on the identified patient. And my role is unique in the sense that I get to work with the family of the people that come through the door, right? So often when we get our loved one to the point of being willing to be treated and willing to get that support and that help, and that continued, inpatient treatment, it's this sigh of relief, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, wait, what about all the feelings I'm having now, right? And I'm fortunate enough to be able to start to treat some of those symptoms and behaviors, because what I've really learned as a family member myself, both personally and professionally, is that I stayed sick for a really long time until I started to treat my symptoms and behaviors of my need to control, my feeling like I had to enable in order to keep, things safe, and really adapting and conditioning myself to the things around me in order to try to keep the peace, right? And when my person started to get well and started to approach and attempt recovery, and things were all of a sudden going well, I would act out and create chaos as a sick family member until it was said to me that, I was part of it all, right? I had become a part of this cycle because of the way that I was conditioned to try to learn and adapt to the behavior and the environment that I was living in. So the best way that I've always had it described to me, and that I really try to work with families in describing it, in the question of like, why do I need to get help if I'm not the one with the problem, or I'm not the one putting a drink or a drug in my body? Why do I need to engage in all of this? And the answer shouldn't be, well, you're sick too, right? Because right off the bat, we're going to shut people down if we say that. So the way that I like to describe it is, if you think about it from the lens of a mobile above a child or a baby's crib, right? And you think of one of those strings on that mobile as the identified addict or alcoholic, or what I oftentimes these days like to refer to it as the person that struggles with the substance use disorder, right? If we think about one of those strings as that person, there might be multiple people on that mobile that struggle with this disease, right? But let's talk about one in this instance, and they're being weighed down. That string and that identified person is being weighed down by the disease of their addiction, right? Every other string on that mobile, so their family, their support system, whoever they identify as their family system, right? That could be blood relatives, it could be support systems, it could be people that they know in the rooms through fellowship. Every string on that mobile is being shifted in some way, right? Maybe the ones closest to that string as the identified addict or alcoholic is being shifted a little bit more than the strings over here. But nonetheless, all of them are being shifted to some degree, which means every single person that loves that identified patient, right? That identified person that struggles with the disease is going to be impacted in some way. So if we're being impacted by this disease of the person that we love, how wouldn't we act out in certain behaviors and symptoms in order to try to get our needs met, right? If you think about it in the sense of a child acting out and then getting reprimanded for acting out, well, it's still attention that child is getting, right? So negative attention is still attention. So if I never knew how to get my needs met other than acting out, and now all of a sudden my needs aren't being met as a family member because I feel like things are starting to go well, and I don't know how to function in a system that feels healthy, and I'm not receiving any outside support like my identified addict or alcoholic is, right? Because when we remove that person from the center of the circle, they go away to an inpatient facility. They've got 24/7 support there. And then we transition them to an outpatient or aftercare, or they're going to the rooms. And I'm a family member that doesn't know things like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, parent partnership, ACA, which is adult children of alcoholics, Alateen. If I don't know that even any of these resources exist for me as the family member, well, I'm going to continue along with the behaviors that I've learned to get my needs met, right? So I have a quick reading that I want to share, and then I'm going to kind of tap into what the trauma and the definition of trauma looks like in my day-to-day world of working with families. And I think that the best, most concise way that we can start to address the trauma that exists in family systems is we have to talk about powerlessness and unmanageability. And one of my favorite resources in my personal and professional life, and anyone that's on here that is a part of any other group that I facilitate is probably laughing, because this is like my Bible. And it's something that I utilize every day. Hence why I have it on vacation with me. But this book is called The Language of Letting Go. And it's broken down into daily meditations, specifically focused on codependency. It's by Melody Beatty. And it's something that I use every day in my own life before my feet even touch the floor. I read the passage of the day, and then journal on it at night. But it's something that I recommend to all of my family members, that I work with on a professional standpoint. I'm specifically reading from the passage of May 29th, and it's on page 144 for anyone that does have the book. But like I said, this is focused on powerlessness and unmanageability. It reads, willpower is not the key to the way of life we are seeking. Surrender is. I have spent much of my life trying to make people be, do, or feel something they aren't, don't want to do, and choose not to feel. I have made them and myself crazy in that process, said one recovering woman. I spent my childhood trying to make an alcoholic father who didn't love himself be a normal person who loved me. I then married an alcoholic and spent a decade trying to make him stop drinking. I have spent years trying to make emotionally unavailable people be emotionally present for me. I have spent even more years trying to make family members who are content feeling miserable happy. What I'm saying is this: I've spent much of my life desperately and vainly trying to do the impossible and feeling like a failure when I couldn't. It's been like planting corn and trying to make the seeds grow peas. Won't work. By surrendering to powerlessness, I gain the presence of mind to stop wasting my time and energy trying to change and control that which I cannot change and control. It gives me permission to stop trying to do the impossible and focus on what is possible, being who I am, loving myself, feeling what I feel, and doing what I want to do with my life. In recovery, we learn to stop fighting lions simply because we cannot win. We also learn that the more we are focused on controlling and changing others, the more unmanageable our lives become. The more we focus on living our own life, the more we have a life to live, and the more manageable our life will become. Today, I will accept powerlessness where I have no power to change things, and I'll allow my life to become manageable. So the reason that I chose this reading in particular is because when I think of trauma, I think of two specific phrases. The first is helplessness, and the second is a lack of safety. That lack of safety could be a lack of physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, really in any sense of the word, if you have felt that your safety has been threatened in some way. And no person that loves someone that struggles with the disease of addiction has not experienced helplessness and a lack of safety to some degree, right? Our lack of safety has differentiating variations, right? My lack of safety may look different than Lauren's lack of safety, which may look different than Kim's lack of safety. But nonetheless, if you love someone that struggles with substance use, you're for sure going to experience helplessness, right? And that powerlessness that I really just started to mention. But you're also going to feel like that universal knot in your throat, pit in your stomach of what am I going to do, right? How can I help my person? And that is something that we become so conditioned and accustomed to that takes time to unlearn, right? I have to learn how to accept my powerlessness, but not just accept it, really truly surrender to it if I want to progress in my recovery, right? And the key to that is recognizing that the unmanageability that is created when addiction is present in our lives and in our homes and in our living room, right, is not just experienced by the addict or the alcoholic. Unmanageability floods over, pours over, and is experienced by us as the family members as well, right? Some of which is a result of the unmanageability that's coming from our person that we love, but some of the unmanageability is also brought on by our own behaviors and symptoms. Again, going back to that learned behavior of trying to get our needs met, right? When the disease of addiction exists in our homes and in our lives, we're all in survival mode. And, the person that's living with the disease of addiction is living in their trauma of helplessness and their lack of safety through their disease. And their survival mode looks like needing that drink or drug in order to get through the day. Whereas our survival mode is so reliant upon their safety, whether or not they're okay, right? Whether or not they're able to engage in recovery, whether or not they're going to be okay or get the job or have the financial security or keep the relationship or keep the children, whatever the case may be. We become so focused on the other person that we start to learn or we start to lose our identity in the process, right? Which that in and of itself is a gained helplessness and a lack of safety. Because if I don't know who I am and I'm so focused on how I can help my other person be who I think they're capable of being, well, everyone's going to experience what that trauma looks like, right? The difference is if I'm going to surrender to my unmanageability as a family member, I have to know and surrender to the idea that I have a path that's separate from my loved one's path, right? I have trauma that's separate from my loved one's trauma. And some of the questions that I was looking at prior to our meeting tonight was talking about, like, the question around, we don't talk about our trauma. Is this something that we should be sharing with one another? And something that I've learned from my supervisor, Jess Malavi, and then through my own recovery work is it's less about the storyline or the event, right? We don't have to get stuck on the details of the narrative of the trauma that happened to us, but more about the way in which it lives within me. It's similar to the idea of, Lauren and I could experience the exact same event, right? And that trauma could live and exist within Lauren so differently than it could live and exist within me. And there's a lot of different factors that go into that, right? So think about it in the sense of the same family system, right? We go back to that mobile and we're all part of that same family system. Well, some of the strings on that mobile are going to really digest and receive one person's addiction completely differently, right? So I have a younger sister who's 6 years younger than me, and you would think we grew up in separate houses, right? The way that she receives and digests the addiction that lived in our home versus the way that I lived and digested the addiction that lived in our home are different. Neither experience is less important or less valid or less traumatic, right? It just goes back to the type of people that we are and the way in which we're willing to accept that powerlessness and that unmanageability. So when I think about trauma being present in the family system and the steps to acceptance, which was one of the questions that I was looking at, like, what are the steps to acceptance, right? I wish there was like this map, right, that we could take and be like, okay, you go to step 1, then you go to step 2, then you go to step 3, and then poof, here you are in recovery. And unfortunately, that's not how it goes, right? And I might get through steps 1, 2, and 3 on the map, and then have to go all the way back to step 1 and really revisit what that powerlessness and surrendering looks like for me, because it's going to depend on where I'm at in my seasons of change, right? In my seasons of life, depending on what season I'm in as a human being, is gonna have an impact on how I digest the way in which I'm loving the people around me, and most importantly, the way in which I'm loving myself in recovery. But what I know to be true is that as a family member, right, my recovery doesn't need to wait for anyone else, right? I don't have to wait for anyone else in my family system to choose recovery if I want to continue to choose recovery. And what I mean by that is what I was always taught and what I always adapted to. It was, chaos existed when the loved one was in active addiction, and everyone would circle the wagons, and you would become accustomed to the walking on eggshells and really just figuring out what you could do to get through the day if that person was in active addiction. And we conditioned ourselves to adapt to the chaos, right, and the dysfunction. But when recovery would enter the house, sometimes we wouldn't know what to do, but sometimes we would fall in line, right? We would follow the lead of the identified addict or alcoholic. Oh, they're going to meetings, they're attending therapy. Cool. We're all on board for recovery. But should and when that person, maybe potentially experience a relapse, what's very common is the family follows that lead, right? Maybe the family's following in line of recovery, and then all of a sudden a relapse occurs. And I so often see the family follow in that dysfunction and that chaos. And we pick right back up where we left off as families in a traumatic state, right? So the steps to acceptance on the family side of the street, I truly, truly believe start with the powerlessness and the unmanageability, right? But without identifying and surrendering to powerlessness and unmanageability, I believe in a foundation of education, and what that foundation of education can look like is even being able to admit and identify that we as family members who love people that struggle with the disease of addiction have experienced trauma. And we can't heal from the trauma in the family system if we can't even identify or learn that it's happened to us, right? I can't heal from something that I didn't know I experienced. And sometimes it might sound a little funny of like, of course we've experienced trauma, right? But until I was taught that, I really didn't identify with that. I identified that my life had become unmanageable in my own sense of the word, right, as a family member, but I didn't truly identify and digest that, oh, I've been through trauma too, right? And even it allowed me, by identifying that in my own life, and what I oftentimes work with families on is by allowing yourself to identify that, it typically can help us tap into some empathy of recognizing the helplessness and the lack of safety that our loved one, who's the identified addict or alcoholic, might be experiencing. One of the biggest lessons that I try to teach the families that I work with is you don't need to know exactly what it is your addict or your alcoholic is going through, right? I spent a lot of years trying to understand, like, I'm going to know exactly what my person is going through, right? And I would Google it, and I would read the books, and I would watch the videos, and I still haven't found that answer, because what I stopped looking for was recognizing how it was living in me, right? And I don't even know that I was actually ever really looking for that. But what I started to do was learn less about how my person was going through this process, and learn a little bit more about how can I understand me as the daughter of people that struggle with substance use, right? As the friend, as the partner, as whatever the, as the parent, whatever that blank looks like for you, really identifying where your helplessness and lack of safety has come from. And it might even be long before, the identified patient that you're coming to something like this for, addiction even existed. And what I mean by that is, a lot of you, if not all of you, right, because this is for parents, are finding your way to a room like this because of the addiction that's found its way into your child's life, right? But the program of ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, like I mentioned, there's a high percentage of people that may have a child or a partner that struggles with the disease of addiction. But if you really peel back the layers, you can also identify that you grew up in a home that existed with substance use or any type of mental health, which creates that dysfunction and chaos, right? The walking on eggshells that we experience when we love someone that struggles with the disease of addiction oftentimes mirrors the walking on eggshells, or that feeling of dysfunction, if you have a mom that struggles from bipolar disorder, right? Or if you have a dad that struggles with high suicidality. And if you love someone that struggles with major depressive disorder, there's going to be symptoms of walking on eggshells that are very similar to loving someone that struggles with substance use. And I mentioned to Kim that I would talk about my own experience in ACA to kind of wrap up my portion of tonight. And I have been a part of Adult Children of Alcoholics I just celebrated my 9-year anniversary in June. I have a sponsor myself. I've been through the 12 steps that are the exact same 12 steps that someone in Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous would work. The only difference is that I have to look at it from the lens of how this has impacted me as a family member, right? That I've been sick in my own way. It's just that I hadn't put a drink or a drug in my body. My dysfunction came through in a different way, but nonetheless, it was incredibly unmanageable and was impacting my life in many different areas until I found my own program. So I have a home group that I go to every Thursday night that I actually have a chairing commitment and am not there tonight. So I have FOMO, which is fear of missing out. I'm so happy that I'm here with you guys and that I'm at the beach in Cape May, but it tells you that you really are dedicated to your recovery if you're fear of missing out is on a 12-step meeting. And that is the honest to God truth. I have found family and friends for a lifetime in my group. And like I said, I have a sponsor. I sponsor 3 other girls. And it's a program that is based off of these 14 characteristics. And if you Google the laundry list, ACA, which I can't recommend enough, it is so enlightening and somewhat jarring if you can relate to it, because you're like, holy crap, who sat in on my living room and took notes on me? It can be a little jarring if you're not yet prepared, but it can also be incredibly validating, because you're like, oh my gosh, I am not the only human being that can identify with these character traits. And what the laundry list really identifies is just the way in which we may learn to live as adults because of the way in which we learn to live as children, right? And if we don't treat it, we're going to continue to live on in a world of dysfunction that's not going to serve us, right? So the way that I like to look at it is that no matter where I go in life today, I am a healthy enough adult to take care of 6-year-old Mary, 11-year-old Mary, 16-year-old Mary, and today Mary, right? And that's the best gift that I've been given through family recovery. So I love my job, and they do not pay me extra to say that. I am beyond fortunate, and I really do believe I wouldn't be able to practice the principles in my life of recovery, but also wouldn't be able to practice in my career and in my job if I didn't have my own recovery as a recovering family member. So ACA is the program that I work. I would be more than willing to answer any and all questions that you may have if you're interested in potentially looking into that as a resource for yourself. And then again, like I mentioned at the beginning, my Wednesday night group, I'll share all my contact information with Kim to share with all of you. I can put it in the chat in our group tonight. And then I can also answer any and all questions around my family resilience retreat. And I would love, love, love to meet any and all of you in person or virtually. I really appreciate being asked and allowed to be a part of tonight, and hopefully I did it justice, because hopefully it was a good use of your time. Thank you for allowing me to share and be here.
Oh, that was so great. So wonderful, Mary. Thank you so much. I've been an ACA member since 1989. I'm guessing that might have been before you were born, but it's such a great program. And I don't think it gets nearly enough attention. It's so valuable. And I also love that there were some questions about siblings, and I know we're going to talk more, and we have some resources for that. But you touched on so many great things. I made some notes, but I'm going to move on to Lauren, and I'm so anxious to hear from you, Lauren. If you'll go ahead and take the floor. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim and Judy and Mary and Colleen, everybody, for inviting me. It really is a privilege to be part of this, especially with Mary and Colleen. And so like Kim said, I'm Lauren Williams. I'm a social worker. I'm a therapist, and I've been around the world of recovery for a long time. I'm really grateful that Mary started us off with the focus on the family, the impacts of trauma, some of the themes that she touched on. And I really appreciate everything you shared. And for my portion, I'll talk more about an approach to healing that I just feel so connected to. In my therapy practice, in my life, I lean towards and work from and live from an approach called the internal family systems therapy or model or paradigm. It's really has so many kind of flavors to it, but I'll refer to it as IFS, and that's how most people know it. And this is really a framework for us to kind of turn from looking outwards at others or looking externally for the answers to really going inside to look at our internal family or sort of groupings of the different parts of us as family members, as individuals. And I'll say more about that. But this has really been, it's been a game changer for me. And my understanding of people, people I love, people I work with, myself, and also what I thought I knew about addiction and the impact an addictive process can have. So that's where I'll start, but I'd really like to kind of welcome everybody who's here tonight and everything that they're bringing with them, including questions and maybe concerns about really anything that's happening for them right now. But so before we get to the actual quick Q&A portion, I just want to kind of invite people to take a minute. If you have a piece of pen and paper that is with you, you can grab that. If not, that's okay too. And I just want to invite everybody to kind of check in with themselves, turn your attention sort of internally, see if you can kind of just drop into your center and reflect a bit on what brought you to this topic or this, Zoom tonight. Maybe you're looking for answers and you're wanting to figure out how to move forward, or maybe you're logging in with feelings of fear or hopelessness, sadness, anger. Maybe you're nervous, not sure what to expect. Maybe you're here to learn and like I said, you've got a notepad and a pen, you're ready to take notes. And maybe there's other feelings that you're showing up with, maybe related to your loved one. But just to invite you to bring a little bit of awareness to what's here for you right now. And know that all of it is welcome because it's part of your experience. So maybe take a second to write them down if you have to, or if you want to kind of follow along, but just notice that feeling or that thought or that multiple feelings that are with you right now. Just notice it there in front of you. And most importantly, notice you might have a variety of thoughts and feelings and maybe a couple, maybe many. And we're not doing anything with them right now. We're just noticing that they're part of our experience, okay? So we're just really becoming aware of this multiplicity of feelings and experiences inside of us all at the same time. And this is a really important part of IFS and kind of what I'll be talking about. And so one of the tenets of IFS is that our minds, our psyche, our personality are really made up of a lot of different pieces of us or parts of us. And just know that's totally normal, right? We're not just one thing. We're not just anxious, or we're not just scared, or we're not just, this feeling that kind of we think that we are, right? That's not our identity. Our inside world is made up of so many different feelings and parts of us that carry these feelings, and parts of us might show up in the way of thoughts or behaviors, or they might present in different ways. And this is just how they're showing up, right? And so just like our families, our nuclear families, our outside families, there might be peace and balance inside, and there might be discord and conflict inside at the same time. We have kind of a similar pattern and relational system going on inside, just like we do with our outside family. So there might be folks here who might say, like, a part of me, wants to be here and hear some takeaways and get some support. And another part of me is really maxed out and just wants a break. It's been a really long week, right? And we can kind of have both of those experiences at the same time, and just know that we can hold those, right? That can all be here. In a really simplified way, IFS kind of frames this idea of, like, when we experience trauma or get hurt, our internal world kind of organizes around that. Right? Parts of us, we have responses and reactions to that hurt. And these are parts of us that are jumping in and responding and reacting kind of automatically to help kind of protect us from that pain or from that trauma, from that hurt. And sometimes we can get, like, really all blended up with that reaction, right? And these are just reactions. They're parts of us that are kind of stepping in to do a protective job. They're stepping into a protective role because another part of us just got really hurt. And that trauma kind of got stuck there. So like an example that might be common to some of us here tonight is when we worry to excess or are constantly trying to fix or figure out what to do and how to do it in relationship to our loved ones who might be in an addictive cycle right now. So we might step into roles of fixing or caretaking, or even really critical ones like blaming and shaming, and then we have the rescuing, right? So it's really common for when we're really worried about the consequences that somebody's behaviors might be kind of at risk for, or a danger that they might be in. Parts of us might over rescue, kind of swoop in and try to prevent the person from experiencing the natural outcomes of their high risk behaviors. And of course they do, right? Of course they do. They have to, right? They have this like really positive intention of helping. These are parts of us that fear the chaos and the unpredictable nature of addictive behaviors. And these, like lovingly called protectors, they'll often kind of take over our internal world, right? They kind of become our drivers when in response to a traumatic event, or the little or big T traumas that just happen in like really complex relationships and high risk addictive processes. So while these, the caretakers and the rescuers, they might be have really good intentions, they sometimes get kind of thrusted into overdrive and really carry an intense energy to it. So like the constant worrying and the waves of anger or deep sadness or fear, these are all like really natural reactions, but in response to a trauma, they kind of get cranked up into high gear and kind of live in the driver's seat, right? And so again, while their intention of their efforts is so positive, they don't know their impact that they're having on the rest of our parts or our lives, our relationships. And with all of that said, we also need balance. We really need balance, and so we have other parts of us, right? You might have some of your own who really need relief from all of that. Who need to shut off and kind of, they need to sort of distract or soothe us from the intensity of it all. And these parts can get just as intense as some of our other protective parts. Again, they have really positive intentions, but they might sometimes reach for or use behaviors or find outlets that try to soothe us or take us away from the intensity and the chaos inside. Maybe we overwork. We go to lots of support meetings. We go to all the support meetings, right? Or maybe we reach for medications to help us calm down or soothe. Maybe we zone out in other ways, watch Netflix for what seems like forever, or lean towards something to eat, scrolling all night long on their phones. Whatever it is, right? It could be really benign examples or more extreme, but these are our kind of like reactive and impulsive parts of us. Again, really, these parts of us in their natural state, they want to help us retreat and relax and retire in the evening and find balance. But in response to extreme relational circumstances or the internal storm, they kind of get into their intense roles as well. So we might recognize some of these in ourselves and also in our loved ones, right? So just notice the similarities here and the complexities of both of our, all of our internal worlds. I'm guessing that a lot of people on this call tonight have experienced some of this or all of this. And it might seem like these parts of us kind of just take over our every thought. But from this framework, we would say that this experience of being taken over by a part is really the part kind of blending with us. it's not who you are, right? You're not worry, you're not anxiety, you are not scared, right? These aren't who you are, but you're still there, you're still you. And these are parts of you who have really blended in response to the outside experience that becomes, an internal experience. So, you might have feel like you've lost who you are. You don't even know this person you've become since all the stuff has been happening in the family. And we just want to say that you're still there, but other parts have been in the driver's seat. And they've really blurred that sense of self, that connection with yourself, your natural clarity and kind of capacity to feel in control, and that centered, grounded space that we may have had a long time ago. Maybe we've never had it. Maybe we get glimpses of it here and there. But it's in there, right? It just seems kind of inaccessible at times. There's this metaphor that we can use to describe this experience, and it's the sun and the clouds, right? So we know that the sun is always there, never goes away. We just can't see it always, right? Because the clouds, the storms, or parts of us have really taken over. And so what we do is we can kind of help kind of be with our parts, be with the experiences that they're carrying, the feelings that they're holding, the bigness of them. And through this process, we kind of let them kind of feel and get to know ourselves again. So we can kind of access, help you access that place of yourself and who you really are. A lot of families, say they just want to feel like themselves again. And through a process, through this kind of connection with our parts of us or our feelings, we can kind of help to connect with that centered, true, authentic, grounded self that's inside of all of us. We can make, courageous decisions again, and with a lot of clarity and perspective and feeling good and really sure intuitively, right? I think there's a line in 12-step that says we intuitively know how to handle things, right? That becomes really blurred and chaotic, and decisions can be really impossible when we're really blended up with a lot of trauma responses. And, Mary alluded to something that feels really important too. And I had a similar thought that, we're so culturally, right? We're so accustomed to linear models and ways of thinking. If I do ABC, then XYZ will happen, right? And we kind of bank on these outcomes if we just do this or say the right thing or do it in this way. This outcome will hopefully, happen. We're always looking for that exact equation, but we are complex beings, right? We have really complex and old sometimes patterns of thinking and doing and being in the world, and definitely in relationships and with our loved ones. And so this kind of inner working system, well-oiled way of working of thoughts, feelings, experiences, memories that our bodies are holding, this is all based on our lives and our experiences. So all of that may be in play here. So we can't and we don't just work with one symptom or one behavior or one person when we're talking about healing, because there's just so much involved in our internal environment. It just isn't just one feeling or thought or behavior that needs to shift or change. It's an entire internal system that's happening. So we really want to kind of normalize having a lot of feelings, a lot of different feelings and different parts of us, right? We all have different opinions or beliefs and about what's right for us and for others. And we can really notice that internal kind of, storm that happens sometimes with all of that floating around. The hope is kind of the knowing that you have this kind of core internal self, like the sun, right? So we know that you have that, and that's the hope. We know that others have that. We know that our family members and loved ones who are in an addictive cycle have that. And, you know, the hope is that we can kind of access that even little glimpses at a time. And I heard something really sweet recently that was like, even if, you know, the glimpses or glimmers glimpses turn into glimmers or more light, something like that. You know, it was like when you get little glimmers and then suddenly the full light, the full brightness comes on. Those are all like a buildup of little glimmers. So if we can get little glimmers of that self, of that calm, of that clarity, that groundedness inside, and sometimes that happens when we're in connection with other people, like these groups, right? With people who get it, people who get us. And so all of that is kind of accessible. And from that place, you know, there's more opportunity to connect with our internal experiences. And then we can go out and connect with others, right? Like we heal from the inside out. And there's a book that's really special to me. It's called A Cup of Tea with Sadness by a friend and a colleague, Ron Chelsvig. And it's a really simple story about a man who sits down with feelings of sadness and he has a conversation with the sadness over a cup of tea. And it really speaks to the healing power of healing from within by getting to know parts of us or our feelings or things we're experiencing on our inside world. My favorite quote from it is that healing is the process of loving those parts who are hurting. And it's just a really sweet, it's a very sweet adult children's book. I think you know, some of the last pieces I want to say are, is I also really want to say something about our loved ones struggling with addiction. And, you know, they have an internal complex system of parts too, that can hold really beautiful qualities that we know and we know that they have, like kindness and being caring, intelligence, their loving nature. And at the same time, they can also have the complexities of being in the midst of an addictive process that can be really destructive and high risk and hurtful to themselves and others. And, you know, understanding this and connecting with that can really help us kind of acknowledge that our loved ones are not their addiction and we are not our trauma. And because of that, it still kind of carries this possibility, right? And prior to tonight, Kim had sent us a lot of your questions, and in reading them, I can really sense the care and the love and that you have for your people, as well as the fear and the desperation that's present and driving the questions. And what I know is that to help our loved ones, you know, I can't emphasize enough the power of working with our own stuff, right? Our own feelings, our own experiences, our own internal world. Whether that's things that have happened in our own personal histories or in relationships with our loved ones. It's just so vital that we're able to kind of hold and heal our own stuff so that we can go towards our loved ones with more compassion, more calm, with clarity and courage, and most importantly, with a lot of patience. It can be just such a gift to our loved ones. Kim had used that phrasing when I talked with her earlier this week, and that was really it was a gift to me, right? Because it is, I was looking for that wording, and can be really such a gift to our loved ones to be able to help our own wounds and have compassion towards ourselves. And, you know, working through our own healing, our own recovery, really shows our loved ones that it's possible, like it's possible to recover and to heal from feeling so lost. Yeah. And like that's hope. That's when there's hope, there's a possibility of change. Trauma can happen. I think this is like I'm taking this from somebody else. But trauma can happen fast or over time, but healing like almost always happens slowly. But it's possible. So I'm here just to kind of share with people and help them get to know their patterns of feelings and their thought processes there to help them kind of sort out the chaos of it all so that they can really access what's, you know, deep inside of us. And from there, healing and moving the notch forward can happen. So that's where I'll that's where I'll end. Thank you so much.
Lauren, that was absolutely beautiful. You articulated the emotions that I think so many of us family members have felt in such an authentic and accurate and sensitive way. I just can't thank you enough. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And now I'm really excited to introduce my friend to you, Colleen, who I am so grateful to for joining us. Colleen, I'm going to let you introduce yourself in any way that you like. Oops, I've got the wrong person spotlight there. I'm going to go over to Colleen. Where did you go? All right, Colleen, there you are. Okay. Hey, Colleen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. Thank you for inviting me. Wow. This is a subject I am passionate about. So I'm so happy to be here with you all tonight. And it's really interesting that Kim asked me now. I first of all, I was signed up for this seminar, and Kim saw that and asked me if I would share my personal experience with trauma. And I have been on this journey for 14 years. And I wound up in Kim's parent group many years ago. And when I entered that space, I said, basically, I just wanted a relationship with my person. You know, that was what was important to me. And now that I'm at this length of this journey, I have some different perspectives on this. And my perspective right now is that this is a long game. I think up until recently, I may have thought, okay, we're going to get to here. This person's going to do this. And my person is in recovery. There's a lot of good going on, but this is still a long game. One of the things I would say I think is most important for me in my journey, there's so many pieces, and I have 3 sheets that I've made notes. So I don't know what I'm going to say to you. So I hope I'm just going to say whatever feeds you right now, or whatever you may need to hear right now. But one of the things that has really supported me during this journey is humility, in that I don't have all the answers. And I can tell you what is good for Colleen. And I can tell you what is good for Colleen in Colleen's space, but I cannot tell anyone what is good for them. And that includes my person. So over these 14 years, I have learned that I can say, not this here, not this right here. This isn't happening, because that is a boundary that I can have to protect myself. But I in no way say, not this over there, because my person is going to have to make their decisions about how they want to live their life. And if I make those decisions, or if I choose to carry any of that baggage, their journey gets really, really light. And my journey gets super heavy, because I'm doing the heavy lifting. And just loving someone who struggles, loving someone so very much and watching them struggle is heavy enough, without the assumption that I can come in and save a day or fix something. I do not have that power. The only power that I have is over myself. So that's one of my biggest takeaways over these many years. And I think up until probably recently, I was like, you know what? This is going to be good. We're going to get to this point, and man, it's going to be smooth sailing. This is great. But it doesn't go that way, because when we have these people in our life that struggle, they're always going to be, it's not like there's like a switch and they're like, it's all good. No, it doesn't go like that. And as a family, we have our own trauma, just like Mary had said, and just like Lauren had said. So I had to spend some time in these years. And now, right now, at this leg of the journey, I'm really willing to do more of my own work. Because I was raised in madness, I didn't recognize madness. Madness was really hard for me to understand or to spot or to see. So some of the things that I have done for my trauma is I have put myself first. The only time I have elicited any change in any human is when I started with me. The change came from me, in me, and they were moved by that change, or they were shifted by that change, or my behavior changed. Thus, their behavior had to change because what I would tolerate was no longer so open, and I got protective of me. And being protective of me means I can't speak on the phone at certain times. My phone's not always on or open. And that's really, really hard because I think, God, what if someone calls me and it's at that one moment and they need me? And my son is bipolar. So in addition to addiction and substance use as a way to medicate, still addiction, regardless, this is something that we're going to deal with and we're going to navigate and really he's going to navigate and I'm going to give him the space to figure that out. And I'm not going to, pop up with any answers. As far as my own self-care, I am a seeker. So I explore. And when I sensed that things were getting like when my person needed help at a very young age, one of my people, I threw myself in group therapy. I'm like, oh, they're in group therapy, so I'm going to do some group therapy. Group therapy is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I have never done anything harder, honestly, besides raise these people. It was such a learning experience for me. And, that was one of many things I did, just to be able to do my own work, just to be able to not be so absorbed in someone's pain that I lost myself. So as I look back over this journey of 14 years, would I change it? Yeah, I definitely changed some pieces of it if I could. But I've been working with Patrick Dowling for a little bit, my husband and I cannot recommend Patrick enough. And I'd love to tell you that it takes one therapist to help me. That's not true. I have a therapist I have with my husband. So we can cope together and navigate together as a team. We have a therapist just with my person. And again, this is not weekly. This is once a month with this therapist with my person. So with our person, we don't have to sit there and be like, I don't have to be pissed off all the time because like I'm a can. Like we all know we're going to sit in a room in a safe environment and be able to talk. And that has been a lifesaver. And then I have my own therapist that I see occasionally. Like this is not like I'm not in therapy 3 times a week by any stretch, but I have different people that help with different things. Yoga is integral in my life. Art is integral in my life. I'm an artist. I use visual journaling. So I find that if I have a way to get these feelings out, and I'm not talking throw up out, like I'm not like he said, she said out. I'm talking like, here's a piece of black material and I feel just dark. Today was dark as it could possibly get. And I put it down and just even that. And if I want to elaborate, I can, but when I don't hold things inside and I put them down, magic happens. I get to go through life much lighter. And one of the things I'm super protective of is my childlike joy. I've had it all my life. I'm not letting that go for anybody. And And that includes, people that I love. And I also feel like as parents, as caregivers, as people that love people who suffer from dual diagnosis or, an addiction, mental illness, and trauma, that we have the ability to be teachers. So I reached a point, at one point, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of talking. I think I'm going to show you how this is done. I'm going to start living. I'm going to start really living. Not at the expense of you, but in addition to being here, I'm going to really live fully because this is my life as well. And I'm not willing to give that over. As I look here at some of my notes, I think that self-care requires vigilance. Because if you don't take care of you, no one else is going to take care of you. And I teach my person that too, that you have to take care of you. This is your job to take care of you, and it's my job to take care of me. I really aim to move forward in faith and not fear. Whenever I act fear-based, nothing good happens. I do not respond. If I'm angry, I sit on it. I feel no need to have immediate conversations, and I have a voice. We all do in my family. I'd like to talk about this later. This is not a good time for me. Feeling a little emotional. I think, could we table this conversation? Could we have it tomorrow? So when I give myself that, I also give them that. I think some of the big things that have happened on my path, and it has been a path, is I trust my knowing. I trust my knowing. And I trust my knowing because I'm in touch with my knowing, because I do the work. I do my own work. I take care of myself. But because I trust that knowing, I believe that there's people that are put in my path that are going to help me find the way forward. And sometimes someone will say to you, like, I'm sure, like, my God, like, maybe they're not even someone you know well. And they say, something wrong? Like, you really just don't look like yourself. And when someone said that to me one day, I said, you know what? Yeah, something is really, really wrong with me today. And I said, my son is in a psychosis and it's ugly. And that person said, you know what? I know just the person for you to speak to. I know just the person. She put me in touch with a police officer that was trained to deal with these events, and also had a brother that was right where my son was. And the story did not end well. And I still keep in touch with that person. But I'm saying this because sometimes we like to keep our pain so close as if only we experience it. But for me in my path, I have found that when I show up real and I use my knowing, and I'm not like, like, you wouldn't know anything about my life if you met me. Now, if I felt like there was some part of my story that would help you, I would share it with you in a heartbeat. But I'm not like, it's not total. I mean, there's so many other pieces to me than this journey. And that's really what I want to share here, is that it's not exactly, as someone dear said to me, Patrick Dowling, the other day, hey, it's a different movie script. And I said to him, yeah, it is. It's a different movie script than I ever signed up for. But you know what? I can still be a rock star. I can still be a Meryl Streep in my role in this this role that I didn't sign up for, but I'm here. I can still rock this role. I can still rock my life. And when I don't carry the heavy, other people pick up the heavy. And I would say I'm able to do that because I sat in Kim's parent group every single week for many years. I don't know how many years, many years. And these people are still my friends. They are still in my texts. They are in my life. And I'm grateful. So I'm hoping in some of this that there's something that touched you. So Kim, I have Mike over here giving me signs, like, hey, Colleen, you're right there. So I just wanted to say there is so much hope, and not just for the person that is in your life that is struggling, but there's hope for you in this journey. There's hope for you, even if the journey is hard, you can find ways to take care of yourself and create the boundaries that you need so that you can be joyful. And thank you for having me speak.
As always, so eloquent. I mean, my goodness, this is a rock star panel. I'm so amazed. Thank you, Colleen. Just exactly what we needed to hear. Thank you very much. All right, I want you all to please think about what you might want to ask or comment, but I'm going to go ahead and touch on at least one of the advanced questions that I thought was extremely poignant. Our family doesn't talk about our trauma, and they go on to describe a very visceral, specific experience that was traumatic for the entire family. Is that okay? Or should we be rehashing or something? How do I know my other two adult children are okay? I think this is such a really great question. I would love to hear from Lauren, Mary, Colleen, anyone who wants to share.
I can share a little bit, and then Lauren or Colleen, if either one of you want to jump in. I think this was the question that I was referencing in part of my share in terms of like the re-traumatization that could potentially happen in when people get really stuck to like trauma dumping or storylines. So what I mean by that is we can talk about trauma without reliving every moment of it, right? And the reason that I say that is because sometimes that can create more harm than healing. When we're so attached to the storyline of explaining the details of what happened, oftentimes our nervous system will stay in that fight or flight or freeze stance if we're continuing to stay attached to the details of the trauma. But one of the best ways that I think we can normalize difficult conversations in the family system is acknowledgement, right? So where there's acknowledgement, there doesn't have to be the potential for re-traumatization, because if we're acknowledging that something happened, that in and of itself is acknowledgement of it impacting the family substantially, right? And one of the ways, like the specifics of this question, right? I think one of the ways that you could potentially check in with those other two siblings that are mentioned, right? The other two adult children is, and I'm not being facetious by saying this, but because I know it's easier said than done, but is onboarding some tools to be able to have a conversation. Like, this is difficult for me to talk about too, right? But I want to create a space where we can at least acknowledge that, like, we all went through something really difficult, right? Witnessing something like an overdose is life-changing. I don't know if I'm prepared enough to talk about it right now, but I just want to put it out there that I want to talk about it, but I don't know how to talk about it. Maybe we can find someone to help us talk about it, right? So like Colleen was mentioning, maybe there's a specific therapist or an objective third party that could help us start to navigate how to have that conversation. But just the acknowledgement of like putting it out on the floor, which is part of the way that we break the cycle, right? Because what happens in the family system is like we all see the big pink elephant that's in the tutu tap dancing in the corner, right? But none of us acknowledge it. So if I just say like, hey, this overdose happened, we all saw it, we all know about it. I don't know how to talk about it, but I hate that it's here. I'm sorry that it's here. And I'm just wondering if you feel similar to how I feel. Like that starts the conversation, would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Mary. And I can jump in, but also want to check in to see if any hands were raised. I can't see.
I don't believe so. Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So something that Mary had said when she was talking in the beginning is that just everybody experiences often people experience the same event differently. Um, and so, we really want to get curious about like what is the meaning, or what was the takeaway, very, very generally, that each person made of that experience, right? What was it? And we don't have to rehash,
Mm.
right? And it's not about the details and the timeline of the events. It's I felt really lonely. I felt alone. Nobody saw me. Nobody, connected with me during the experience. The experience never moved through, right? So, or a belief about the world, me and the world. Maybe that's what came out of the experience. Maybe the belief of I'm not enough, or I'm a bad parent, or I didn't do enough, right? These are the meanings that we make of experiences without having to rehash the experience. So it's like this curiosity, this question of like, what was that like for you? And so that's how we can kind of check in with each other, I think, in a really, really tender way without kind of like ripping the blanket off.
Anybody who wants to jump in? I mean, certainly, I think a lot of us can relate to this because especially when you're a parent, from the moment our child comes into our life, we are their advocate. We are making sure they're safe. That is feels like job one. It is a huge priority. And then when we're going to these meetings that are telling us we need to detach and all that kind of stuff, that doesn't work for me. So, I do think that it is not unusual at all to find ways to escape all the feelings that we're trying to navigate. Well, and we can't rely on their well-being to determine what our well-being is going to be, right? That's kind of the definition of codependency is like, that thing we used to have in our fridge that says, a mother's only as happy as her unhappiest child. That's not a great way to live, and it's not really serving our child either to put that onus on them to be responsible for our happiness. Colleen, I see you want to say something. Go ahead.
I do. I want to say, please be gentle with yourself, because taking care of someone, keeping someone alive is exhausting. It's exhausting. And sometimes when you're in it, you just do it. And maybe now, no surprise, she's fine. She's steady. You can breathe and you find that you can't move. Like, that's not surprising. And I cannot tell you, like, I think there's like, I think part of self-love and self-care is saying, you know what, today I'm going to stay in bed all day. I'm going to do that today, and that's all right. And so maybe just to be really kind to yourself right now and say, you know what, you did what you had to do, and take your time, but it's time to begin again. And we start slow. It's not like a sprint. So that's my thought on that. But most of all is kindness to yourself, because you just really helped someone that you so love, and you're wary, and that's okay.
Boy, I love a metaphor between the pony and the horses and the sun and the clouds. And I'm loving all this. This is so much good stuff. It's 8:31. So out of respect for everyone's time, I'm going to wrap up, but if anyone wants to stay on and chat, I'll be here just to follow up with anyone. But I want to ask our panelists, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
One thing that is coming to me as you were sharing, Mary touched on it too, but I don't think it could be highlighted enough that, you know, sometimes our loved ones do find a pathway of their own. And then we get to find our own pathways. And so just because, you know, a loved one is doing well and they've kind of launched, right? Now we get to maybe turn towards some of our parts that are really still hurting or carrying some of that in our own time, right? And at our own pace. So lots of patience.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I actually wanted to touch on that a little bit too, just to speak to you. And in essence, I'm really speaking to so many of us, right? My instinct is to go towards using the language of like, I had to reintroduce myself. But I've learned over time that like, I just had to meet myself at one point in time. And it just happened to be when I was like 20 years old, right? I didn't know who I was outside of being like, you know, the sister or the daughter of people that struggle with substance use. I didn't know who I oftentimes refer to myself as like, I didn't know who Mare was. Like the closest people in my life don't call me Mary, they call me Mare, right? And I had to meet Mare, and she is like really cool, right? But it took me a long time. But the biggest piece of advice that I could give and continue to give myself, right, is that we can't meet ourselves or do a reintroduction or an introduction of any kind in recovery without grace and kindness. So to approach with grace and kindness is a beautiful gift that we can give to ourselves. And you, I'm sure, have given it to, you know, your daughter and other people in your life. But one thing that I think is really important is that knowing who we are outside of other people is really important. And like Kim kind of alluded to, is once you become a parent, you're never not a parent again, right? Whether they're 12 or 32. But just getting to know yourself in this season of life is a beautiful thing. And then the last thing that I'll say is just that I am very grateful to have witnessed some of the recovery that exists in this group tonight. So just thank you again for having us.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you all so much, Lauren, Mary, Colleen, Judy. It's been such an amazing evening. Thank you very, very much. And again, I'll stay on for anybody who has any further questions or if there's anything I can do to support you. But many thanks to this amazing panel. Have a beautiful evening, great weekend.